I've contemplated making this video for a while, but I've never really had the right opportunity or right moment to think of and go off of making this video. But since this is shortly after Phil Myers scored a game-winning overtime goal to beat the New York Islanders in the second round in Game 2 of the Stanley Cup playoffs in 2020, I feel like that this game and this moment would be a good point for me to just explain everything that I'm about to say about my history with the Philadelphia Flyers. Now, anyone who knows me now knows that I'm a huge fan of the Philadelphia Flyers. I love them. I love the Flyers. And I generally am a huge fan of the NHL, and I love the sport of ice hockey, despite never playing it in my entire life. And we'll get to that later. But it has not always been the case for me. And when I was younger, I would say I was into it. I was into the Flyers. I was into the NHL a little bit. I had some video games I used to play, some NHL video games I used to play that used to be really fun. But it was never really as big as the other teams in the city, like the Eagles, the Phillies, the Sixers. It was never really as big as that. But and mainly that is due to the fact that really no one in my immediate family, like my dad, my mom, my siblings, they weren't really that much into the Flyers except for playoff time. And you always used to get up for playoff time in big moments when I was younger, when I was a kid and like early teenager. And the main moment that I can always recall, and I can always look back on, even in now as well, would be the 2012 playoff series against the Pittsburgh Penguins. That was one of the biggest sports spectacles that I have ever seen. Not just as a Flyers fan, not just as a Philadelphia sports fan, just sports in general. That series was truly something to behold. Those two teams hate each other so much. So much. They still hate each other now, but I feel like in that series they were just on the verge of literally murdering each other on the ice. There were fights after every whistle. There was tons of goals scored in that series. There was very bad goaltending, and it was really the series that catapulted Claude Giroux into NHL stardom. And in Game 6, he had a great moment. The Flyers won the first three games of the series. The Penguins came back and won the next two. But in Game 6, Claude Giroux just took over. After the opening faceoff, he hit Sidney Crosby, and about 15 seconds later, he scored the opening goal of the game. That set the tone perfectly. The Flyers went on to win the series. Now they ended up losing to the Devils in the next series, and that's really when, for whatever reason, I just kind of fell off from the Flyers a little bit. And I think the main reason was that at that time I really started to get into the NBA and the Sixers, and I figured that at the time I figured that it was really hard to be a fan of both of them at the same time. And since they both play really at the same time, like they both their seasons both start in October, and their seasons both regular seasons at least both end in March and April. And I figured at the time it felt like it was hard to be fans of those two teams at the same time, like truly intense fans of those two teams at the same time. And for some reason, I gravitated towards the Sixers in the NBA. I got really into the NBA at that time, and this was even during the Sixers tanking process. But the Flyers weren't really doing that well either from 2012 to 2018, and and proof enough is that they had a string from that time where they either missed the playoffs or made the playoffs but lost in the first round for many years in a row. Like 2013, they missed the playoffs. 2014, they lost in the first round to the Rangers. 2015, they missed the playoffs. 2016, they lost in the first round to the Capitals. 2017, they missed the playoffs. 2018, they lost in the first round to the Penguins. And the Flyers were like an afterthought during that time. Like they were just a team that was mediocre and pretty frustrating to watch, honestly. And were a team that were not really like respected as a legitimate contender like they were before, and for the majority of their history, they just kind of were there. They existed, but they never really inspired fear in any team that they ever played. So, but in 2018, I decided that no matter what, I was going to get into this team, and I was going to get into the Flyers. I was going to become a Flyers fan again. So I looked up all the players on the team. Like I obviously knew who the main players on the team were. I knew about Claude Giroux, I knew Jake Voracek, I knew Sean Couturier, but young guys that came in when I was kind of not as big into them in like the mid 2010s, like guys who came up like Travis Konechny, Travis Sanheim, Shane Gothisbehere, Ivan Provorov. I like learned about those guys. I learned about their future and how they were coming up, how they were pretty much the future of the team, and I got to know those guys. And not only that, but when I'm a fan of a team, I make an effort, a concentrated effort to learn the history of that team. So what I did was go back and learn basically all the history of the Flyers and learn all about these great players and great teams. Like I obviously knew who Bobby Clark was, but other guys on that '70s Broad Street Bullies team like Bill Barber, the Watson brothers, Reggie Leach, Rick McLeish, Gary Dornhofer, like those guys, I learned about their whole history. I learned about the '80s teams with like Mark Howe, Brian Propp, Tim Kerr, Dave Poulin, Murray Craven. I learned about the Legion of Doom era with players such as Eric Lindros, John LeClaire, Michael Renberg, Rod Brindamore, Eric Desjardins, Mark Recchi, uh, and teams in the early 2000s like Jeremy Roenick, and it was really like a good thing for me because I really enjoyed going through the history, and I was ready for the 2018-19 season. I was ready, and I went to my first game in a while, like a really long time. I went to a game in November with one of my older cousins, and they played the Arizona Coyotes, and it was a great game. They were down in the game. I believe it was a game where they gave up two shorthanded goals on the same power play, so that was not fun. But they ended up winning the game in overtime due to a Shane Gothisbehere goal, and that it was really the game that reignited my interest in the Flyers. I became like a Flyers fan for the game, and mainly for the first time in my entire life, I became a huge Flyers fan after that game. And overall, the 2018-19 season wasn't that much fun, except for the fact that they got Carter Hart. Carter Hart finally came. That they came up through the roster, and Carter Hart's a player that I just loved immediately because I played soccer for the majority of my life, and when I played soccer, I was a goalie, and I related to what Carter Hart goes through, and like not nearly as much as what Carter Hart goes through every night. I don't have to. He faces 30 shots a game. I only had to face around 8 or 9 a game. But I still sympathized and I understood the pressure that it takes to be a goalie in any sport, and I immediately gravitated towards that. Plus, the fact that he's only about 4 months older than me really helped in that matter too. But the 2018-19 season wasn't that much fun. It wasn't really the best year to really get into the team again. They used 8 goaltenders with the aforementioned Carter Hart, Brian Moose Elliott, Michael Neuwirth, Anthony Stolarz, Cam Talbot for a couple games, Cal Pickard for a couple games, Alex Lyon, and this guy Mike McKenna for one game, I think. So that's 8 goalies. They set the league record, and one of their only major year highlights was the stadium series that they played against the Penguins. Wayne Simmons' last game as a Flyer, as of right now, and it was a game they were down late. JVR scored to make it a 1 goal deficit. Jake Voracek just threw the puck on net, and they sent it to overtime, and G finished the rest. He scored, and Flyers won. It was a big win. It was a big time, happy game, and that was really one of the only highlights of the season. But in 2019-20, this season, this past still ongoing season, it's crazy to think about that, but I had high hopes. I liked the Elaine Vigneault hire. When I became a Flyers fan, I not only became a Flyers fan, but I became an NHL fan, like a hockey fan, and I understood and learned about the history, all the great coaches, the great players, the great teams, and everything about it. I just fell in love with the sport. And at this point, I love the NHL way more than I love the NBA. I love like I think it's much more entertaining. I love the just the grit, the tenacity of it more, and I like the fact that these guys just play hard every night, no matter what. Unlike the NBA, obviously. And I did, yeah, and I love the Lane Vino hire. Thought that he would be a great coach of the team, way better than Dave Hackstall. And I liked a lot of the pickups they got, and the team didn't get off to the best start, but by the time the All Star break after the All Star break, they just caught fire, and it was just a great ride. I went to 5 games this season. I don't think I've gone to 5 games in my entire life before that. I went to a game against the Canadians in November. I went to a game on my birthday in December against the Senators. I went to a game against the Panthers in, I believe, January or February. And I went to 2 games in March. No, 2 games in February against the Blue Jackets and the Sharks. And I even took one of my buddies along with me who wasn't really that into the NHL or knew much about it, but he became a fan immediately. So that was a really awesome experience. And yeah, I just love everything about the Flyers now. I love this team. And at this point in my life, I feel like I will always be a Flyers fan forever. And I feel very fortunate and very happy that I made that decision 2 years ago to get back into this team again. It felt so rewarding. It wasn't that rewarding in 2018-19. I'm really glad that I got into them that year as opposed to this past year because I could have been labeled a bandwagon, and I do not want that. I assure you that in 2018-19, that was the year that I got back into the Flyers again. And yeah, it's been such a rewarding experience. Like, I love the game so much. I love going to games so much. And at this point, I would say that going to Flyers games, that's probably my favorite game to go to out of any team in the city. Like, I would say, yeah, Flyers games are probably my favorite game to go to. I love the Wells Fargo Center. I love that atmosphere. I love the speed of the game, the physicality of the game, and there's not really a much better feeling than when the Flyers goal and that "Feel the Shake" song comes on and everyone's going crazy. Everyone's high fiving left and right, random people that you don't know. But I just wish that hopefully one day we can get back to that after the virus ends, and we can get back to having fun at games like that again. And I'm very optimistic towards the future of this team too. Like, despite their stars such as Giroux and Voracek getting a little bit older, they're in their early 30s at this point. I still love the future of this team. Guys like Konechny, Provorov, Sanheim, Obey-Kubel, and even guys who are still like young in the farm system like Morgan Frost. They're going to bring a lot to the future of this team, and I'm really happy about that. I'm really happy overall that I got so much I got into this team again, and it's been such a rewarding experience. And and I decided to record this now because Phil Myers' goal was fantastic. I nearly ripped my hair. I nearly ripped my hair out that game. That was a really frustrating game. They were up 3-0, and the Islanders came back to tie it up 3-3. But Mizey won the game in overtime, and that's all that really matters. And they can lose this series, and I would still be proud of this team. And because no one predicted them, they would be this good. They would be a legit cup contender this year, and I like their future as well. And yeah, and that's just been my history with this team and how I became a huge fan of this team again, and how the Flyers have become and they've become a big team that I root for, and and on the same level as the other teams in the city. And so yeah,